Moving into the area as the storm impacts our community. The time to leave is now. This is the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office. Mandatory evacuations have been ordered for your area. Please leave now. We anticipate significant.
Well, it's getting real.
This is the Rebel Call channel. Welcome to today's show. Welcome to the dystopian reality that our government is creating. It kind of gives me flashbacks to a few years ago when I was told when I could or couldn't leave my home and what I was supposed to wear if I did leave my home. And then, of course, all of that came to a head when I was told that I wasn't allowed to be employed or earn money to feed myself or to put food on the table for any of my loved ones, my parents, whoever else I might want to provide food for, unless, of course, I put something in my body that didn't make me immune to anything in the first place. So that's what suburbia is starting to look like. That is Florida. That is cars driving around. It's an eerie scene out of a horror film where they're telling everybody to leave. They're telling everyone that there's a curfew in order. And it's very familiar because this is the new norm that they're creating. The more desensitized people become to it, the more commonplace it becomes, the more they accept it. And if you haven't seen the radar photos of the actual hurricane, well, it looks a lot like a man-made demon, so to speak, right? I mean, this isn't the first time that we've seen these eerie images that have been released back when Hurricane Matthew hit. I covered it back then too, even though I'm brand new to YouTube. This, just like Hurricane Matthew, looks a lot like a demonic entity that is now being called Hurricane Milton. And I had to do this video on Hurricane Milton because thankfully the government is making sure that there's no misinformation being spread. As people are getting flooded out of their homes, as they're washing up trees, as the water is reaching levels above trees, as people's children are floating down the roads, their animals and pets are missing, don't worry about it. It's time to combat misinformation because that's the greatest enemy to humanity, is questioning who could be responsible for such a horrific event. If you actually question the narrative that they're giving you about the climate, well, you're a horrible person. And if you didn't see the video I did about the Phoenix Rising simulation or the Phoenix 2.0, well, almost immediately last night, CNN and other mainstream media outlets on their main page started reporting about the similarities with worst case scenario simulations, the ones that Tampa Bay government agencies put out there to show you exactly what it would look like when Tampa Bay gets flooded out. And don't be at all curious or suspicious about how those dates lined up in that simulation that they put out from 15 years ago, where they literally said October 10th and then showed you what it would look like on October 16th. Don't you dare question that. That's a coincidence as well. And if you didn't notice, while all of this chaos is ensuing, instead of the government actually trying to help the civilians that are getting their lives destroyed, the government is focused on getting out propaganda. Like the USA Today that has this article out there. NEXRAD, HARP, and Doppler radar can't control hurricanes. Fact check. Now, thankfully, we have fact checkers like Nate Trella to let us know what's actually happening in the world because he's a fact check reporter. So if you have the title of fact check reporter, obviously everything in Nate's life is going to be factual. Is Nate factually a creep? I'm sure he factually is. But Nate is here to let us know that he doesn't really need credentials, that we could trust him, that he's going to give us just the facts, right? Because, again, if you were the government and you had weaponized weather and you were able to manipulate weather, you would obviously let everybody out there know about it, right? I mean, if you were the government and you controlled the media and you controlled the mainstream like USA Today, of course you would do the right thing and tell everybody out there that you have the ability to manipulate the weather. You wouldn't put stuff like this out there to make sure people don't realize that the government's gone completely rogue. So, of course, they want us to think, and it's amazing that regular people out there see these types of fact check articles and it actually works on them. It might be the weakest form of propaganda mind control that I've ever seen, but apparently it does work. And of course, we can look at Nate. We know how Nate votes. We know everything about Nate just by looking at Nate, right? Because we have a new breed of human beings we're living among. But we have to take Nate's word for it. So while I give you what Nate gives us in his article in USA Today about HARP and about the ability to control the weather, let me just first, I have to let Nate know a few things, like documents released from our own government called Weather as a Force Multiplier, Owning the Weather in 2025, because guess what? It's 2024 and we're coming up very soon on 2025 if we make it that far. And this is something that was released by the United States Air Force. So I don't know if Nate knows, but the United States Air Force is a branch of the military that works with and for our government. So this was released by them. This isn't cosplay, Nate. This isn't a document that was released in Fortnite in your wet dreams last night. This is a document released by our own government that's called Owning the Weather by 2025. And while I read all the stuff that Nate says, don't mind these other things that you'll see flashing on the screen, like Nikola Tesla's earthquake machine or government patented hurricane makers and tornado making devices that the government has created. Let me read for you what Nate's telling us. While you see on the screen United States patents and trademarks going back to 1891 that include things like method of producing rain, silver iodide, cloud seeding generator, just normal things that would make you not think that the government was manipulating the weather. Because of course, the government has thousands of patents about something like controlling the weather, but they would never actually try to use any of these patents that go back all the way to 1891 on the citizens of their own country, would they? These are probably just things that they were throwing around as ideas to use in war with other countries, because there's no signs whatsoever that our current government hates us so much that they try to convince people to poison themselves, and on top of that are trying to convince people to enslave themselves, imprison themselves, while telling all of us that we're horrible, we're racist, we're bigots, and making sure we're down one another's throats 24/7 while the government's busy working on patents like these. So Nate gives us a little article here in the USA Today that the claim, as you can see the patents flashing across the screen, the claim here from an Instagram post includes a video of a weather radar map and a hurricane moving up through Florida into the southeast US. Blue flashing lights can be seen pulsating on the map across the hurricane. Who says you can't control the weather? Reads part of the post. They cook this one up and push and pull it wherever they want using NEXRAD, Doppler, and HARP. The post was liked more than 4,000 times in 10 days. They love to tell you how many times the posts were actually liked, right? It's almost like it bothers them that people aren't falling for their propaganda. It's just, the thing is, what's more amazing is that people do. So Nate's rating on that is false. It's not possible, Nate says, to control the weather at a large scale. HARP studies the ionosphere, and there is no known mechanism for affecting the weather from there. Doppler radar such as NEXRAD also can't control storms, according to experts. And again, Nate, Operation Popeye, which is well documented by our government, which you could even see our own government admit to on their own controlled media like the History Channel. They openly talk about Operation Popeye when they cloud seeded and manipulated the weather. I mean, you could even look at the government in Dubai. They openly talk about cloud seeding to make it rain. So don't worry about that stuff, Nate. You're right. We trust Nate, right? So Helene was a natural phenomenon, Nate goes on to say. How does Nate know it was a natural phenomenon? Well, because Nate says so. And he says it's the deadliest mainland hurricane in the U.S. since Katrina, spurring a rush of conspiracies about its origin, but the idea that it was created or directed by various technologies is unequivocally false. I'm glad he threw a big word in there like unequivocally to make sure people out there can trust Nate by using big words, right? Even though it's not really a big word, but in today's society, that's a pretty big word since most people can't even complete sentences. These days, they have to use emojis to speak. So he says weather systems, thunderstorms, hurricanes, cold fronts, winter storms, they all move based on mid-latitude flow. Okay, don't forget that. Altering the large-scale flow of a storm would require changing the climate, such as the water temperature. And this is impossible, nor is it the mechanism alleged to have been used in the post. So thankfully, whoever posted that about Helene being man-made was actually a professor of atmospheric and oceanic sciences at the University of Colorado. But that's not a good enough qualification for Nate, okay? Because it doesn't agree with Nate's narrative. So even though this is a professor of atmospheric and oceanic sciences, it's not the science that Nate or the government want you to follow. So we're going to discredit somebody with the credentials. Kind of like all those doctors that were discredited because they wouldn't go along with mass genocide, right? So, it's kind of funny, isn't it? I mean, it's a sick world that we're living in, right? Nate goes on to say HARP uses a transmitter and advanced instruments to study the ionosphere, a layer of charged particles that separates the atmosphere and space, but there is zero evidence the ionosphere can affect the weather. No, there's zero evidence. There's only 1 trillion patents on it. There's only documents from the U.S. Air Force talking about owning the weather. There's only Operation Popeye. How about this, Nate? Nate, let's listen to another expert who has spoken in front of Congress about how the government made a deal of how they would never, ever, ever use weaponized weather in a war with another country. But of course, they left out that they would use weaponized weather against their own countries.
So what we have here, according to the Senate and Congress and other people, are folks that will look you straight in the face and say, well, the idea of weather control, creation of earthquakes electronically and all of that's absolutely ridiculous, Mr. Fletcher, or anyone else that might ask it. However, we find out that our nation 20 years ago actually went into an entire convention that said, now that we can do it, we promise that we won't use it against other countries. Well, unfortunately, that promise does not include using it against ourselves here in the United States. So, again, when Senator Cole had asked me what it was that I meant, inferring that the New World Order persons will utilize it as a weapon against us, that was what I meant. A friend of mine said, there's patents on that equipment. And as you can see here, he's absolutely right. These are the paperwork of the actual patents on the electronic means by which waves or rays, if you will, can be utilized to block, stop, move, alter, change the weather. It includes creating storms, expanding them, and even generating ELF, low-frequency vibrations that actually can move Earth in the ground itself and possibly generate the possibility of earthquakes. But the very equipment that's being used presently, covertly, secretly, in a multitude of outrageous experiments and programs right now, the application of magnetics, electronics, electronic waves, and what have you, is all come off of the original Tesla experiments.
So how convenient, right? How convenient that all of this technology was supposed to be created to protect us, to create advancements in modern warfare. I mean, directed energy weapons, creating monsoons. Oh, right. And now we're seeing all of this stuff being done to the civilians, especially since the civilians refuse to comply with editing their genetic codes to be altered, almost like man and machine in a sense, right? A lot of people refuse to mix iron and clay. So the governments would never, ever use this against us. We have full-on proof that the government can be trusted. We have Nate telling us. We have the control media that censors everybody out there that thinks that there's a giant conspiracy going on, mainly because most people are waking up feeling like something's terribly wrong with the world that we live in. Remember that intro? That something's terribly wrong with the world that we live in, but they can't figure out what it is. And that's what people like me are here to try to help them to do. Because they know something's off. That's why people are waking up. It's not because, oh man, these guys get more clicks than we get. It's because your propaganda is awful. Everybody can see how the government's behaving. Everybody can see that all the government's trying to do is sow distrust among civilians. What most civilians are realizing that the distrust really comes between us and the government. And then, of course, they just continue to give us science that makes no sense, right? They tell us about the climate. They want us to believe the climate, but now the scientists tell us that men can have babies. So how can we trust the science anymore? Chromosomes aren't real anymore? These are the same scientists, of course, that tell you that you need to take something and put it in your body immediately, even though it will not make you immune. Thus, it kind of cancels out the whole reason of you taking it in the first place, which would be to prevent you from getting it, right? So thankfully, Nate and the rest of our heroes in the mainstream media are putting out fact-checking so that they could really just give more credibility to people like me and you. Because these people are they lack discernment and have zero self-awareness so badly that they put stuff like this out there and they actually think that it's going to work on the majority of people. Now, it does work on a good portion of the sheeple, which is a pathetic state of affairs, that this type of stuff actually works. But if you do understand old communist propaganda, you see how it does work. You see how they have manipulated people so much so by empowering them to think that they're making these decisions and choices freely, which They are not. So folks, NEXRAD, HAARP, Doppler radar, they cannot control hurricanes. There is no proof that controlling and manipulating the weather is real, other than about 1,000 patents, Air Force documentation that tells us that they want to own the weather by 2025. Not just manipulate it, own it by 2025, right? Not to mention all the other stuff that we could see with our own eyes, which I always tell people, just use your own eyes. If you don't want to look up patents, just look up in the sky. You think those are real clouds? Think again. You think those 5G towers are sitting up there so you could download a song faster or watch Netflix quicker? Think again. It's all there for a reason. And the reason is exactly what you're seeing play out right now. And they want to make sure you fall for their psychosis. You fall for what they tell you it is, because that is the key ingredient to all of it. That you comply, you fall for it, and you change your behavior and give in to government demands like digital identifications and carbon footprints. I thank everybody for being here. Hope you're all doing well. God bless all of you as always and your families.